The Constitutional Court has heard arguments for the decriminalisation of the possession and use of cannabis by children. This follows a 2020 High Court ruling which found that provisions of the Drugs and Drug Trafficking Act unconstitutional because it criminalises cannabis use by a child. For more on this, I'm joined by a researcher at the Center for Child Law, that's Isabel Magaya. Isabel, a pleasure to have you on the program this morning. Now, as the Center for Child Law, you want the Constitutional Court to confirm this Gauteng High Court ruling declaring that provisions of the Drugs and Drug Trafficking Act unconstitutional to the extent that it criminalises the use of possession of cannabis by a child. Talk us through your application.
So, good morning and thank you for having me on the show. So as some of your viewers are aware, in 2020 we received the High Court order confirming that children who are found to be in use or to be using or in possession of cannabis, they must not be taken through the criminal justice system. Instead, they must actually not be criminalized or treated as criminals. So we had been involved in a matter as amicus. We had 4 clients who had tested positive for using cannabis at school, and the school was well within its right to test and to conduct the test and have the children referred for disciplinary measures. But as the center, what we were against was the process whereby the children were taken to the criminal justice system to deal with the issues of cannabis use and possession, which is not a crime for adults.
Now, looking back, in 2020, the High Court ruled that children found guilty of trivial offences, including the possession of or the use of cannabis, may not be incarcerated. Now, it would seem that judges were faced with a very tough decision on whether criminal penalties should be imposed on children. Give us some context on this.
So, if you remember, the issue stemmed from the 2019 Constitutional Court judgment of Prince, which had decriminalized the use of cannabis by adults. And that judgment only dealt with the issue of adults using cannabis in private use.
Right.
So as we know, children do not enjoy similar rights. If children are to smoke weed, they're not likely going to do it at home. So they're going to do it in other places. So the issue stemmed from the Drugs Trafficking Act not specifically dealing with children, and the Constitutional Court in the 2019 judgment not being extended to apply to children.
But in turn, will this not effectively be authorizing children to consume cannabis?
Absolutely not. We're not encouraging children to consume or to use. What we're essentially saying is that if we find children to be in possession or to be using cannabis, we should rather help them. So firstly, the parents must get involved. If there's need to get social workers involved, we should do that. What we should not be doing is sending them to jail like they're criminals.
Right. Now, there was also an argument that in a scenario where a child was found in possession of cannabis, the system that must deal with the child was not the criminal justice system. Speak to us about alternative ways to better manage such crimes.
So remember, there are kids who are addicted to substances such as cannabis. What we're saying is that if a child is found to be in that particular situation, they must be referred to a social worker who will conduct a thorough investigation of the surrounding circumstances to determine whether or not the child actually needs rehabilitation, and they make a referral. So there are also programs that the child should be entitled to in terms of the Children's Act and the Social Abuse Act. So we're saying that in those instances, the children should be referred. And then there are other instances where maybe the children are just smoking behind something and they're actually not addicted, they're just using it. So we can conduct, or schools can conduct disciplinary proceedings instead of referring the matter to the criminal justice system.
And just remind us of where the court proceedings are now. What's the way forward?
So our arguments were heard on the 3rd of March, and we're waiting for the Constitutional Court to hand out judgment.
That was Isabel Magaya from the Center for Child Law speaking to us there about arguments made in the Constitutional Court whether to not decriminalize the possession as well as use of drugs, more specifically cannabis, by children.